Welcome to Dirty Laundry City with Isabella and Silvana.
An unironically relatable female millennial podcast where we talk about health, relationships, and being in our 30s.
Airing out your laundry has never been so dirty.
Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Dirty Laundry City for more. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to Dirty Laundry City. I'm Silvana.
And I'm Isabella. Thanks for joining us for our second episode. Yeah.
We're going to start off every episode moving forward with a laundry reflection. So there's going to be lights, which is your positives of, I don't know, I guess the week, the month. Your darks, which is something that bad that's happened, negatives, and then your delicates. I kept saying sensitives, and I don't know why. Your delicates, which is what are your intentions? What are you working on? What's something that you're actively working to improve?
Yep. Okay, so I'll start off by saying my light, so my positives. I've been doing this challenge called the 75 Hard Challenge. It's not the health and physical one that most people know. So that would definitely be a challenge.
When you first told me that, I was like, every day.
Are you okay?
Every single day. 2
okay?
workouts a day.
No. This was a challenge founded by a influencer, TikToker called Old Loser in Brooklyn. Definitely check her out.
Old Loser
in Brooklyn.
Old Loser in Brooklyn. Got it.
She's a fashionista. She came up with this challenge to help you kind of reduce your spending and really take a look at what you have in your own closet. So you're not supposed to buy anything new, accessories, clothing, anything
for
hard. 75 days. And you're supposed to take a photo of your outfits so you have a catalog and you can see back in your phone what looks good on you, what's working. It really really to help you analyze your own inventory. What's your light?
Oh wow, that's really good. God, I don't think I could do that. 75 days of that.
I mean, it's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, I like a little online shopping, as I think we all do. My light, I would say, is book related. What a surprise!
Surprise.
My favorite author in the romantasy fantasy series was just spotted at lunch or grabbing a coffee with Margot Robbie, which is really exciting for those who don't know. Sarah J. Maas is one of my favorite authors, and there were rights that were bought a long time ago to make her books like a show, and it kind of looks like it might actually come to fruition, which we didn't think it would, just because a lot of times rights are bought and it never gets turned into anything. But Margot Robbie has been producing all these amazing things lately.
Yeah.
So I don't think she'll act in it. I'm assuming not, because the characters for a lot of her books are very young, like 19, 20. But I mean, if she does production like she did for Barbie or Saltburn, that would be insane. So I'm really excited about that.
Could be a mini series even, or
who
knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I think those books will be turned into something.
They're just so big. I think they have to.
For sure.
Okay, what's your dark?
So my dark would be, I think something that most people struggle with in New York is finances, and just really being able to afford life. You spend a lot of money towards your rent, just living in general, your basic needs, and not really having enough left over to save. So that's something that I've always struggled with, especially being someone who likes to shop. That's why the 75 Hard Challenge is a positive. And I think we're constantly comparing, like, if I lived somewhere else, it would be so much cheaper, but I would be missing out on the experience of living in New York. So.
I get a lot of pressure too from my parents about that. I think when you're at an older age, obviously what's so important is being comfortable, and they don't associate New York City with being comfortable.
Right.
So, and they know that it's so hard to save here. So I get a lot of pressure to move somewhere where it's more affordable. And
For sure.
I understand that because I think what we make here, we probably would do a lot better in
Yes.
other areas and maybe actually be able to afford to buy things, especially like a home. I mean, I can't imagine buying anything around this area. It's just impossible.
No,
So I get it.
completely
I think that's
impossible.
a conversation we can have more of too, just kind of the pressures of like financial freedom and us being independent and not wanting to rely on other people. It's definitely
Right.
a conversation to have.
For
but
sure.
I get that.
Especially if you are a single person and you're the only one paying for
Yeah.
rent and the utilities. It's a lot. So.
My
dark.
My negative. We just got word that our dog is not coming when we thought we were going to. My son is not entering the world, which sucks. But the mom just does not want to get it on.
Is not currently procreating.
She's taking a stand, which I don't blame her.
Yeah,
Honestly,
she's done.
join the club. But
She should be on the podcast.
we will not be having Crouton, which is his name here, for a while. So that's a bummer. That's my negative.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the next one is our delicates. So something that we're actively working on, being more intentional with. I would definitely say for myself, just working out, incorporating that into more of a routine, because I feel like once you kind of get out of it, then it's impossible to get back into. So I have been doing yoga a lot for the last year and a half, which is helpful, but I want to add kind of more lifting or just cardio, anything. So
Yeah.
well, how about you?
Delicates for me. I have so much going on this year. I think we're at the point now where we are entering the time of every single person in our lives are getting married, which is crazy. It's so, obviously being in New York, I think it's a little bit maybe even later than other people in other parts of the world. But I mean, we're 32 and we're finally entering the stage of all of our friends are doing bachelorettes and weddings and all that. So I just have so much going on this year. It's really overwhelming. And have a lot of anxiety because I'm just so busy. Not that I don't want to be. I love being busy and I love having plans, but it's just like lots of different girls together. And, every other weekend I'm traveling on a plane, and that's a conversation we can have at a later point. But like my anxieties that I've developed in the past couple of years have put me in a position of just being really uncomfortable on planes and et cetera. So the point being, I'm working a lot, talking to my therapist and just like being a lot more present in the moment and not worrying so much about the future. And I think that's just like a larger just goal in general, probably for everyone, but very mindful of what's happening right now and just dealing with it right now and not so much worrying about what's going to happen in the future. So, I mean, it's so hard.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle.
It's a lot to juggle.
You want to be at everything too, but
Yeah.
sometimes
I know.
you have to say no to things.
I know. And that is just the hardest thing to say to someone, to say, I can't go to your bachelorette. I can't go to your wedding. I wish that it was more acceptable. Like I really, and it, I don't like dumbing it down a relationship to, well, you don't feel how much I care about you and love you just because I don't go to your bachelorette at your wedding.
Right.
Like it shouldn't be just
Yeah.
that. But I think we've placed in as a society so much importance on those things that if you don't go,
Yeah, your value is like diminished.
right, exactly, and you just feel this intense guilt. Like I had to turn one down last year because I was going through something like medically, and I still felt
bad.
so bad when I knew my body just couldn't. I wasn't supposed to go anywhere and I wasn't supposed to do anything. It's when I was freezing my eggs, and I just like felt this immense being like, wow, I'm really letting someone down.
Right.
And that, it's just
The guilt.
the guilt. And
Guilt is real.
when you really value your relationships, obviously that's
you want to show up.
it's tough. Okay, so topic of this podcast
Speaking
today.
of relationships.
Speaking of relationships, so we are focusing this one on parental relationships, friendships, and coworkers. Yes. We're going to be speaking about romantic relationships separately. That deserves its very own episode. I mean, I could talk about that, as we know, for hours and hours. But yeah, let's start off with coworkers.
Mm-hmm. So I think your relationships with your coworkers is very unique because they are complete strangers to you when you first meet them. I mean, like everyone, but I think it's really interesting that you are spending a certain amount of time with these people for the majority of the week. And what that kind of looks like for everyone is obviously different, but I do think in some situations people can really know their coworkers and can also really not know their coworkers. So you can have like a very intimate relationship where nothing is off the table. But I also think there are some people that I work with that I know nothing about.
Nothing. Yeah. And you can still interact with them every single day, but not know one thing.
Right.
And it's so interesting, too, because the way that they are at work could be totally different than how they are outside of work.
Yes. And when you see them out, like in the wild, too, it's like jarring.
Yeah. It's like seeing an ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, I have to avoid them. And then you're like, do I say hi? Do I walk up to them?
Right.
Do I not? Do I pretend they don't exist? Do I pretend like I don't see them even though we clearly saw each other?
Yeah.
The anxious mind.
The hamster wheel again.
The hamster wheel.
So yeah, well, I mean, what about you? I think like early on in your career, you've made some really great connections.
Yeah, I did. I think a lot of it is attributed to being in New York.
Yeah.
Because the environment that you're entering into when you are 21, maybe just graduating college, which was us, moving here and just being like, I want to do everything. I want to be a part of everything. Right. And so you're out there, like you are going to work every day. I mean, I started in a, kind of like type of job where you're constantly there. This was pre-COVID too. So I think it's a very different circumstance now, but this was all pre-COVID. I mean, I was at work, probably 10 hours every day, maybe, or even longer. And I was spending more time with these people than I was spending with my friends and my family. I mean, probably 90% of my time was with my coworkers. And so really got to know me on probably an extremely unhinged level too, because I was, again, 22. I was down for whatever.
Right.
I was trying to experience all that New York City has to offer. So they saw me at my absolute best, my absolute worst. I mean, I would come in hungover, right, on like a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And they probably knew.
They probably were hungover as well.
Well, they were as well, yeah. But what I'm trying to say is like they knew me better than anyone else. And so I think from there you start forming this bond of like having a, very similar experience of being in New York and really having it be the primary focus of your life.
Yeah.
So.
I think that when I was definitely first starting, you kind of want to be friends with everyone too. Like even if
So open.
Yeah. You're just open to meeting new people and experiencing like, the after work culture, especially here.
Because how else do you really make friends?
Right.
I mean, when you were that age, obviously you had some friends from college, but probably all of your new friends were from work.
Yeah, exactly. And those friendships that carry over even from work, I think are really also very important.
Yeah.
If you're able to maintain them, because everyone wants more friends.
Yeah. And everyone bonds over some sort of like trauma, right?
Yeah,
I think everyone's first couple jobs can be a little traumatic.
Yeah. You're complaining about how much you're getting paid, your manager or whomever. Like,
I mean, you're making no money.
If you're working in retail, like I did for a long time, you're, bonding over the crazy hours or the customers that are coming in.
Yep.
So there is a lot of that, much very similar to like school, even like you're bonding. You might have only seen certain people at school, but you never really hung out with them.
Shared experiences. So let's pivot to I think what we're going to talk about the most probably is our familial relationships, parental relationships. How would you what's the most important, I think, part of that relationship for you?
With my parents.
Yeah.
I think
And how has it changed, I think, is a big one, too.
I think that I've come from a family that always had a lot of positive affirmations within the house. So whether that's being proud of schoolwork, any kind of project, anything creative, and really understanding the value of independence and being able to be self-sufficient. So I think my parents instilled those values in me, especially as a woman at a very young age. So that's just something that has really contributed to my personality and how I navigate in the world.
Yeah. And what is, like, in terms of independence, how did they kind of, like, bestow that upon you?
It was both my parents worked and they instilled in me and my brother, that's what you do. You, like, go to college or trade school or whatever and get a job and provide for yourself, that no one's going to be doing that for you.
Okay, yeah. So they didn't put the pressure of, like, get married and you'll have a husband to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
There was never anything, when you get married, you won't have to worry about that, or even pressure, right now to get married or have kids. I don't have that existing pressure, which I know a lot of people do.
I think that's really unique for us, because I can relate as well. I don't remember one time in my entire life my parents saying or mentioning until you get married, or this is what you're going to do when you're married, or when you have kids, or we really want you to do this once you're married, etc. I've never had that, and I think people don't recognize, a lot of people our age don't recognize that maybe the reason why that's such a goal in their life is because they have consistently heard that from a family member, from someone in their lives. And I'm not saying it's bad or good. I'm just saying that I think that is probably why we are the way that we are, and we don't value that as much as a lot of other people.
Right. Yeah, we don't think it's your only goal in life should be to, get married and have kids. And that's fine if it is, and if that's what you want, go for it. But I don't think it's necessarily the be end to end all for us, for you and I.
Right, exactly.
I also think the influence of having, whether if you have other family members help raise you, I know that's a big deal in other cultures to have family members live with you, like your grandparents. I didn't live with my grandparents, but they lived down the street, so they did take a very active role in my childhood. I never had a babysitter growing up. I always just went to my grandparents. It was a place of respite because we were very spoiled. I think it was also just important for me to have that generational relationship. I think it's really interesting when kids are around much older people. It kind of instills a bit of respect for them.
Is that where you started,
or maybe
your
fear?
Meryl Streep obsession?
Yeah, I mean, my obsession with like old Hollywood movies and things like that definitely stemmed from
played into it.
From watching Mary Poppins 10 times a day, and that was really important for my parents also, to have them have an active role in our lives.
So I didn't have grandparents close to me, like proximity wise. I had grandparents who I definitely grew up with being around, but proximity wise, it makes a huge difference. And it's so interesting culturally to see a lot of different families, like, whether that's African-American, Hispanic families, or even like really Italian families that grew up in the same household with all of their, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. And it's like, you see that more so, like that relationship is so tight knit, but almost to the point, I think sometimes where you kind of lose a little bit of that independence.
Oh yeah, sure.
Which I didn't have. I was, an only child and didn't have like the close family with us. So I think the independence for me was like a no brainer, like get me out and I want to go live my life. But I think it must be very hard to grow up in that household and be able to leave, because you feel this sort of like
sense of belonging.
Yeah, well, belonging, but then also this like not pressure, but like role in your family where you need to continue that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing, but I think it also can be a bad thing. Like there's elements of it that's amazing, but elements of it that might be
I agree.
a little bit hard. And then also too, the recognition of like generational trauma.
Yes. I mean, I think again, like being a millennial, that the previous generations before us might not have really dived into any sort of trauma work. Maybe, I'm sure there's obviously scenarios where there are people that do that, but as a collective, we are fairly active in doing the work on ourselves and just kind of healing any kind of trauma, whether it's with family or whatever the case may be. And I do think that since issues have been put aside for so long, you do kind of pass that along to the next generation or your children or whatever.
That we have to deal with.
Yeah.
But it's good. I think it's good. We're finally, as like a society, recognizing that like we don't have to continue this trend. And I mean, I think every single family can say that they have
and I don't think things were talked about as openly as we have. A lot of us have the relationships with each other and then with like our family as well.
Yep.
I don't think, things were very much by the book. Why talk about your feelings? Why say I love you? That.
Yeah.
That's
because like we haven't,
not
so why
what
do it?
A lot of society was in American culture, especially.
Okay, my last question for you is, because I kind of have noticed this in my own family. Do you feel like you can openly talk about those things with your parents in the sense of like calling out what's been happening generationally, like what's been passed down, and saying, not placing blame on them, but saying like, look, like this is something that I feel like is not healthy for like a family, and we need to talk. Like, are they receptive and open to talking to it? Because I find that a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, both of my parents are social workers, so they have really seen the worst of the worst situations. Yeah. They've always been very open, honest with us, communicative. I don't ever feel like there's some sort of curtain or something that needs to be pulled back on.
Wow. That's amazing. I think that's really rare.
Yeah, I mean, I have like, great parents that I'm very appreciative of. And they've definitely, took the steps to do that themselves. Like they didn't necessarily have that as well.
Yeah.
Where they could tell their parents anything.
Yeah.
So
but they learned from it, is what
they
you're saying.
They learned from it
because they couldn't have that relationship.
They've actively teach on this,
Yeah.
So, there's obviously little intricacies that but we've talked about of different ways how to, deal with mental health or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can have great parents and be appreciative of how wonderful they've been, like, and recognize how lucky you are by also saying, but also at the same time saying there are things that need to really be talked about and worked on.
Yeah. And nothing is like perfect or ideal.
Is ever, exactly. But it's like, it's so true. Like if the work is not done individually, then it's going to affect the people around you. And,
I think having like that baseline of communication coming from a place of love is really key in how you raise your kids so that they can go on to have healthy relationships as well.
And it's like so much of it is like what you said, coming from a place of love. but it's the intention behind it. Is their intention to make this relationship and this family better?
Yeah.
Is their intention to not just satisfy their own selfish need, but to put that their children and that relationship in front of their own?
Right.
And I think as a parent, you're just doing that in general, right? Because
Yeah.
like when you have a kid, you're like, oh, this is my number one priority.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always translate into like their emotional state,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think for you, since you're an only child, like your parents only had one kid to focus on, which is like so interesting. Like you didn't have to ever like fight for attention or just, they never had to diffuse the situation for, you know what I mean? Like as me, I have a brother we're 17 months apart. So we're really close in age. We're almost like, you know, Irish twins. Yeah. Where my parents were raising us obviously at the same time, but also being very close in age. So handling like the temper tantrums, the fights that go on, or even just, you know.
Okay, so
question?
I am so interested in the sibling dynamic, being an only child, because this is the question that I have to ask, and I've always wondered this.
Okay.
Because I know this is the case with you and your brother, how can 2 children, 3 children, whatever it is, come from the same parents, live the same exact lives while they're getting older, right? Pretty much, to a certain extent, the same household, same upbringing, whatever, and be so vastly different? It blows my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously we're not the same person, but we have different personalities in general. We did get along more as children because it's kind of like your built-in friend that never leaves.
So cool.
When you don't really like think about it. But it is interesting, like as you begin to get older, I have friends that are very close with their siblings and have this amazing relationship, or you kind of drift apart, you live in different places like my brother and I. But it is weird, you know, kind of what personality traits they take on or from people they surround themselves with.
I guess it's so much of that, like
you know,
their experiences. Yeah. It's and I guess you really probably don't recognize, well, that's a lie. I think you can like recognize differences early on, but
we were very different children and we're very different adults. We were different in the way that like he was very well behaved as a kid and I was maybe not so much. I was kind of always getting into accidents, running into tables, very like
which
nervous
is
energy
because you're like the girl. You would think the boy would be the one that's like doing the physical.
No, I was like definitely like nervous energy, like kind of all over the place. And he's very reserved. And I guess
it's just it's so interesting to me because I have no idea what that's like. I have nothing to base it out. I have like close family friends obviously and like close friends, but the comfortability level of like being with someone all the time is crazy. Like I've never felt that.
I think it's different also because it's a boy and a girl, so I had my stuff and he had his stuff. I never had to share necessarily. And we are so close in age, so you'd think we would be maybe closer as adults, but
I would love to know scientifically like how that works. I guess you can take certain traits from different parents too. It's not all equal when you're created, but it's just weird. It's an only child problem right there because I just don't get it. Okay. I think last one, we want to move on to friendships. Your relationship with friends. I would say for me, at the point in my life that I'm at, early 30s, where I am in my career, where I am in my relationships romantically, etc., has come to make me realize within my friendships how we're all starting to really move on different paths. It's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
It's really, really weird.
There's definitely a shift in the paradigm.
There's a shift in the paradigm, and I don't know how I feel about it.
It's weird. It's definitely
It's like kind
weird.
of, it's sad, but it's like,
Sad.
I know it's a natural progression of
Yeah.
life, but it's,
I think it's sad.
it is sad.
It's there's something that I've always yearned for, nostalgia, and so it's like I want us to all, be 16 again or whatever.
Yeah.
Like where
God.
you didn't have to worry about those things. So now we're coming into the phase of life where a lot of our friends are getting married and having kids and maybe moving away from the New York City area.
Yeah.
Or maybe they already live away from you. So just adding those kind of different dynamics into your life and how you're kind of adapting as a person.
I mean, what's the most constant in life is change.
Just change.
So and I'm so happy for my friends to like enter in this new life and path. And it's not like I feel like I'm getting left behind because I have my own things that I'm like working towards and going to. But again, it goes back to the whole pressures of like marriage and kids. And if you're not on that path, where are you going?
Right.
And can you relate are you going to be able to relate at all? And it's, I don't know, like some people you can. So like I have a really good friend that lives in Florida and she has kids, multiple kids. And like, we're still very close, but it's a totally different relationship than like I have with you.
Yeah.
Because I don't really relate to her on so many levels, but we can respect that.
Yeah.
But like our group here, we're like, they were the ones that we can rely on to not like have to be like, oh, I have to go watch the kids.
Right,
or like
right,
we
right.
can call and be like, let's go to the movies or let's go on this trip. And it's like, soon it's not going to be that way. Well, have you?
I'll always be there. I do think obviously it's in where we live is people for our age and older who don't have kids or aren't married. It's not that uncommon.
Correct.
So we do have the advantage there.
Yeah.
There will always be people. But yeah, it's really interesting to see these progressions happen. I also don't feel like I'm being left behind in any case. I just think, it's a different evolution in your friendship.
And can it withstand that
Can
evolution?
it withstand, and that
Some
availability is a lot different.
Yeah. But if it's a true friend, you hope that obviously you can be. But it's funny what you were saying before because you're from Ohio.
Yeah.
And I like I'm not from Florida. Whew, imagine. Oh, God. No, I'm kidding. We love all the Floridians.
Yeah.
I lived in like northern, like Jacksonville, Florida for 4 years of my life. And I say that just because I know Southern Florida can be a lot different with like a lot of Northerners living there. And it's just like a different environment. But my point is that like we're from areas where like when you're 32, you are like old.
You're most likely married and have kids.
Yeah. That's it. Every single one of the people I knew in high school, pretty much, except for a very select few, have kids because I went to high school in Florida or are married.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very, very rare that they are not. And it's just like their 22 is our 32.
No. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, so like a 32-year-old in New York is like a 22-year-old in Florida.
Yeah. It's so wild to think that at 22 they're at the point in their lives. I mean, I'm not even at the point now, but like at the point in their lives where they're really focusing on that. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that we can't be friends with those people. No. It's just a totally different experience. Yeah. And I think that's why that drew us to living where we are now too, because then I really feel isolated and left behind.
Yeah, there's not as much pressure here.
Yeah.
So in terms of your friendships with other females, I just want to dive into that a little bit further because I think it's really important to touch on. I recently was watching Jane Fonda give an interview, and she's 85, so like everyone should be listening to her. She's a climate activist, she's a feminist, all the things. So she was saying a really interesting point that women always form support systems within their own female friendships, and that men typically their friendships are not as vulnerable as ours. So that's also part of the reason why women live longer than men is because,
is that a known fact, like statistic? Wow.
Yeah.
Because of their
relationships.
That's oh wow.
And I definitely think, obviously, men have friends too, but the conversations they might be having versus our conversations are probably vastly different.
Totally. Yeah. Because they're not able to really be, like you said, vulnerable.
Yeah. And hopefully
Talk
that'll
about
be
their
changing
feelings.
within the next, 20 plus years.
I think it's definitely getting better. It's definitely getting better.
But there is something to be said about how women have always been the caregiver, the helping each other raise their children, always kind of being for them, being there for each other in an empathetic way.
So you think it's based on like history, and that's why the way that we are, or do you think it's like hormonal too, like a scientific?
I think it's history and maybe hormonal as well. Yeah.
I mean, it's so true. Like, obviously, I have guy friends, but the way that I interact with them is so much
completely
different.
Yeah.
Just I think the joy that it brings with female friendships, and like when you can connect and talk about these things on like a deep level, but like come to like a real understanding, it makes you so happy. And I think that's what I was saying before with you can still be friends with people like who lead different lives than you, and even though it can be a little bit sad because you do feel like you're going on different paths, you can at the core relate on just being a woman.
Like that's so much more relatable.
So much more relatable of like we are going through the same things as just a woman, and experiences, whether good or bad, and even just like monthly
like anything that goes on with your body. Like, I'm sorry, a man is never going to be able to understand that
ever. And it's so funny because I feel like everyone I've dated has tried to make me feel like they know what it's like to like go through,
which is even
things.
Worse.
And it's like, are you serious? You just want to be like, you have literally no idea how once a month there's one day where you actually want to like,
you're raging,
kill, like like if there were things around you that could be used against others, you would want to use them.
You would find them.
You would
easily.
Like, it's just, and and I get that they think they know.
They don't know.
But they don't.
One other thing that I'll say about friendships is that I've mentioned this before. I hold my friends to a very high standard because I've had great friends, because I've been able to see my friends truly show up for me, vice versa, shown up for them. I really just have friends that I keep around for really long periods of time.
I mean, you want in any relationship, I think, no matter whether that's family, friends, coworkers, you want to equally get value as you are putting in.
Yes.
So, get the effort that you are putting in. And I think that's really hard, but I think that that's important. And I don't think, and I've heard this about romantic relationships too, it's not 50-50 all the time. I really liked this. It's not 50-50 all the time. It can be one day 100 and 0. It can be one day 75 and 25.
For sure.
But in the end, you're kind of balancing out. Like one day I might not be that friend that could really be there for you in the way that you need, but maybe the next day I can, and I just have to like communicate that. So I think that's really something to remember and think about, and all of that. So okay, so I think we're in a good place. I definitely want to touch on romantic relationships in the next one, I think, because it kind of just like is a natural progression. And I will have a lot to say.
I might not have as much, but I will have the single girl experience.
Yes, I want to hear that. I love a single girl experience. It's like the best thing ever. Yeah, we'll touch on that. Yeah, but thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining.
We had fun. We're gonna continue having fun, and
yes, catch us wherever you get your podcasts, and like and subscribe below. Thanks.
See you next time in the laundry room. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a comment on our YouTube channel at Dirty Laundry City. To also stay up to date with us and get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow Isabella and I on Instagram and TikTok, both at Dirty Laundry City. Special thanks to Nick Ciavata, audio production, Antonio Concepcion, editing, and Side Studio for graphic design logo creation.